Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto becomes the new Kyuubi NaruHina, part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Naruto Uzumaki, 12 years old, going on 13, was running from what could have been the worst day at the Shinobi Academy of Konohagakure no Sato with dried tears in his eyes. Naruto's class today was reviewing the 3 jutsus that would allow them all to pass the final exam, which was only in a couple of months, and allow them to receive their Hitai and graduate the academy as genin. Kawarimi, Henge, and Bunshin, substitution, transformation, and clone. These are the 3 techniques that would allow all the students to pass the exam. The problem for Naruto though, is that he has too much chakra to properly perform the Bunshin no jutsu. While he was in class, Iruka Yumino, the homeroom teacher for Naruto's class, called upon him today to perform the Bunshin no jutsu in front of everyone. Whether it was intentional or not, Iruka led Naruto into a moment where he would be utterly humiliated. When Naruto performed the jutsu like asked, a poof of smoke appeared right next to him, and when the smoke faded there stood a sickly and ghost-like version of Naruto wobbling in front of everyone. The sight caused everyone to laugh at Naruto, except but one. But their presence was drowned out by everyone's laughing at Naruto's humiliation. Iruka, annoyed with Naruto, thinking that he was not taking it seriously, ordered Naruto to perform the jutsu properly, and the process went on like a cycle. Naruto kept performing the jutsu but failed to do so, and Iruka ordered him to keep trying. After what seemed like forever, Iruka scolded him in front of everyone for their amusement. When it seemed like it couldn't get worse, Sakura Haruno and Kiba Inuzuka hammered the last nails on the coffin. Come on sensei, you can't really expect a no-name orphan like that to actually be good at something. All that thing is good for is wasting our time. Sakura said nonchalantly, unconsciously hitting a very sore spot in Naruto, a wound that was forged in his life when he began to question his existence, whether he was real or not, if he was alive or a ghost, whether if everything or anything was real or just a dream. Yeah, I mean, why do you even try, loser? You're never going to be a shinobi. Just quit. It's not like you can do anything. You're the dead last, a no-name. There is nothing for you. You practically don't exist. And like a heated knife, all of the pain in Naruto's life came back right at him. Memories of people ignoring him and waiting for someone to come for him that would never come, loneliness and darkness. The memories kept coming back, and it only got worse when chanting began to reach his ears, listening to everyone calling him no name. It was too much for him to bear, and so he ran. Naruto ran, and he kept up running even when he heard the voice behind him telling him to come back. As Naruto ran, he did his best to ignore the looks that people gave him, to ignore the look of disgust and scorn. He kept running until he reached his apartment. Once inside, Naruto immediately went to his bed and wept. He wept as he couldn't forget the pain of his past, his present, and the images of a hopeless future where the happiness he always dreamed of never came. As he wept, he began to feel a presence in his mind, one that he remembered all too well. It was the presence of the being sealed inside of him, the presence of the being that was always there for him when he was small, the presence of that awoke to save him from his loneliness, the presence of the being that took one of the roles that no other wanted and gave Naruto one of the things he always needed, a father. The presence was that of Kurama, the Kyuubi no Kitsune, and Naruto's surrogate father. Naruto, why do you weep, Sochi, son? What happened? Sob, to-san, I don't understand. Sob, I thought that I was a good person. All I ever wanted from them was their friendship, to feel welcomed with them. Was that too much to ask for from them? To just be friends? Naruto, I know it hurts, and I am sorry that I can't do anything to help you with the pain you feel. I'm sorry, Sochi, I wish I could do more. It's alright, to-san, it's not your fault. Sochi, tell me exactly what happened to you today. Who? Naruto, the window. Naruto was brought out of his weeping when he heard something crashing through his window. When turned around, his face came in contact with a fist to his cheek that sent him flying towards the wall. Trying to stay conscious and fighting the stars out of his eyes, Naruto looked up at the intruder that attacked him, only to see that the attacker was a man dressed in an Anbu outfit, and a blank mask, the words, "Nay," painted on the forehead. Naruto, run, hurry. Naruto tried to do just that, but was stopped from doing so when he felt a pair of arms grabbing him into a full Nelson headlock, telling him that there were two intruders instead of one since the first was still in front of him. He tried to struggle out of the headlock, but it was all vain when the first intruder came up to Naruto with a syringe in hand and brought it down onto Naruto's neck, shooting its contents into him and sending him into unconsciousness. When he was asleep, the Anbu let him drop down to ground into a heap. Objective complete. Kyuubi had been captured. Let us return back to Danzo-sama and present him with the Foundation's prize. The first said before grabbing Naruto and disappearing with his partner in Shunshin of Wind. Time skip. Foundation headquarters. Danzo Shimura was waiting in his office for his two operatives that he sent to go and capture the Kyuubi Jinchuriki, and he didn't need to wait much longer as the very two operatives appeared via Shunshin with a bundle clad in orange in one of their arm, breathing calmly as it slept. Report. Operation was a success. Danzo-sama. Objective was sedated and captured successfully. The Kyuubi is now yours, Danzo-sama. The operative spoke as he placed the bundle on the ground, showing that it was an unconscious Naruto, before bending onto his knee and bowing his head to Danzo. Danzo looked at the unconscious form of Naruto Uzumaki and smiled. Finally, after nearly 13 years of waiting, the Kyuubi was now his to command. Take the Kyuubi to our research facility in the east. We will make him into the ideal weapon for me to control there. And with a sound of, "Hi Danzo-sama," the two root shinobi left with Naruto in their arms, taking him down to the laboratory where the nightmares of Naruto's life will become a reality. Danzo looked out the paper window screens of the room, down at the main chamber of the Foundation HQ, smirking with pride that the dawn of his plans has begun, and that his ambitions will finally succeed with his new weapon, ready to be forged out of the ore that is Uzumaki Naruto. Soon, everything will over. The nations will finally kneel before the leaf, and under my rule as Hokage, peace will be brought onto the nation's nation. Everything I have dreamed for has begun come to fruition, and you Uzumaki Naruto are going to be my greatest weapon to this ambition. Soon, you will be the perfect tool, my precious Jinchuriki. Time skip. Foundation Research Facility 3 months after capture. Pain. That's all he felt for 3 whole months, nothing but pain. Naruto Uzumaki looked into the ceiling mirror and looked at his body through it. Clad in only his pants while his entire upper body was exposed. The Hake no Fuin that housed his father inside of him was damaged and tampered with. It looked as though bits and pieces of the seal were rubbed off and others were fading away, the spiral in the middle, closing in on itself, becoming more and more just a black circle as each day passes. He continued to look at his body through the mirror with dead eyes as he surveyed, finally falling on the most noticeable of all the changes that had occurred to him. During his time tied down to the table in this room, Danzo experimented on Naruto's body with the Kyuubi's chakra, trying to amplify Naruto's primary power, and he succeeded. What Naruto eyed were the burnt orange fox ears that now adorned his head, replacing the human ears he once had, now gone, and also the new appendage that was attached to his tailbone. The tail was a 5-foot-long appendage, covered in burnt orange fur, the whole thing restrained and tied down to the table. The fur on both his tail and ears were worn and unkempt from not being properly groomed. Naruto also noted that his whisker marks were deeper than before and his canines were elongated to the point that they were peeking out of his closed lips by the tip. His hair was also longer. Unlike his previous hairstyle, this one was more wild. Instead of his hair rising in large spikes rising up from his scalp, His hair now had multiple spikes all over, making it hard to count how many there were. His hair also weighed more so that it fell more down to his scalp, but still retained its spikiness. His hair was also longer to the point that the back reached his middle neck and bangs of hair reached the middle of his cheeks. Naruto was looking around the room some more in another useless attempt to find a way to escape this hellhole, but like the last 1,000 times, to no avail. Why? Why did this happen to me? Why must I suffer so much? Kami-sama, why did you let this happen to me? Do you not even care about me? Was I just a mistake that you made and wanted nothing to do with? Naruto, enough. She is not blame, that man Danzo is. To-san, are you alright? Not really. The seal is wounded. It's making it harder for me to sustain it. To-san, is there anything that I can do to help you? Maybe. Come to me, Naruto. Perhaps there is something we can do. And with those words, Naruto let himself fall to unconsciousness to see what and how he can help his father with the seal. Mindscape. When Naruto he came face to face with his surrogate father, Kurama, in his Hanyu form. Kurama had long rabbit-like fox ears coated in a deep, almost blood-red fur. Attached to his tailbone were 9, 2-meter-long, fox tails that swayed gently behind him, but still gave off the feeling of unrestrained power as they swayed. Kurama's face was similar to Naruto's, but also different and more refined. Kurama's cheeks were more chiseled than Naruto's and his whiskers were darker and deeper, giving off a feeling that can only be described as feral. His hair was the same color as his fur, but longer than Naruto's. Whereas Naruto's reached down to the middle of his cheeks, and the middle of his neck, while Kurama's hair reaches down to the middle of his shoulder blades and a good inch below his cheeks. Kurama's eyes were a big difference when compared to Naruto's. Whereas Naruto has almond-shaped eyes, Kurama has parallelogram-shaped eyes, and instead of blue eyes, Kurama's were red with a slit running down the middle where the pupil should be. He stood at 6 feet 3 inches, and even though he had qualities that screamed and said, "Badass," he still held a warm smile when he greeted Naruto. "Hello Sochi, how are you?" "To-san," Naruto screamed as he launched himself towards his father. Kurama caught Naruto and held him in his embrace, saying soothing words to Naruto as he held him close to him while Naruto began to cry into his shoulder. When Naruto began to calm down, Kurama began to end the embrace and looked at Naruto in the eyes, but now there was also sadness behind the warmth that came with his eyes. "Naruto, I have to tell you something, but first, do you remember that I told you that I won't always be there to help guide you through your trials? That one day, I will have to leave you behind, but that was years upon years away." "Hi, I remember To-san, but why are you telling me this? What's going on?" "Naruto, I'm afraid that the day that we are two separate has come far sooner than it should have. Because of that bastard Danzo meddling with the Hake no Fuin, my chakra started to pour into your coils, and while you can handle some of it, the amount flooding out would have been too much for you to handle, so I held it back, but not before it could damage the seal. Ever since then, the seal has slowly but surely begun to deteriorate. I'm afraid that it is now at a point that if we don't do something, the seal will fail, and you will be destroyed. What should we do? What can we do?" "Naruto, what I plan to do is open the seal and allow my chakra into your system, but also, to allow my body and chakra to fuse with yours, allowing you to have my Biju-level chakra coils and chakra core. In essence, you will become the Nadaime Kyuubi no Kitsune, taking my place." But what about you To-san? What will happen to you if I become the Nadaime? "When my body is absorbed into you, I will die. No. Please To-san, please. Please don't leave me. Please To-san, please. I have to Naruto. I refuse to stand by and watch as my son's future is taken away from him. I refuse to watch as my chakra slowly poison him and tears him asunder from the inside out. I refuse to watch my son die before my eyes. To-san, please, there has to be another way. I wish there was Naruto, but if there was I cannot see it, so please Kit, allow me just one last act of being a father to you by giving you a chance at life. 2-san, okay. Kurama then went up to Naruto and held him in his arms for one last embrace before he left him. Naruto, whatever happens, never lose sight of your light, it will guide you, and lead you home, promise me. Kurama asked, his eyes watering and sounding like he was about to cry as he held on to Naruto more, not wanting to let go. Hi 2-san, I promise, Naruto said with the same tone as Kurama, but didn't have the same strength to hold back his tears as he wept into his father's shoulder. I'm so sorry Naruto, I know you wanted us to do so much together, I wanted to do so many things with you as well. I wanted to see you break boundaries and become the strongest that there ever was, I wanted to see the friends that you would make, I wanted to see the family you would have when you found your Mezujutsu, and see the day you are named Hokage, I'm so sorry Sochi. Kurama finally let some tears fall as he held Naruto, his mind flowing through images of the things he regrets will be left undone. After what seemed like an hour, Kurama finally let go of Naruto and looked him straight in the eyes. Are you ready? Naruto nodded. Good. Naruto, one thing you should note is that when your body absorbs me, you will become extremely strong, that you will even rival all the 5 cages without breaking a sweat, but all that power will very likely destroy your mind and you will become feral. So before I do this, I will seal your most precious memories into a chakra gem that you will find with you. I'm sorry Naruto, but you won't get your memories back immediately from the gem. The chakra gem I am giving you will hold onto your memories until it senses that you are strong enough to handle them again. The gem will guide you to your light. We don't have much time, so I will begin the process. Just remember, I love you Sochi. I love you too, 2-san. Then let's do this. Kurama then began to glow a low white light, and as he became brighter, Naruto began to feel as if he was losing moments he knew he shouldn't have forgotten, and the feeling of pressure began to overwhelm Naruto as he fell to his holding his knees, breathing heavily. As his eyes began to close, he took one last look at Kurama and smiled his brightest smile for him one last time. Sayonara, 2-san, I promise, I will make you proud. You already did, and I know you will. Sayonara, Naruto, now I know it was you that the old man was talking about back then, you are the one who will bring peace back to this world, I know you can do it, take care. And with those last words, Naruto's world was consumed in darkness as everything around him began to fall around him, succumbing to oblivion as the feeling of raw, unrestrained power rushed through his veins. Outside Naruto's mindscape, Naruto's body began to glow a bright red light as he absorbed his father and become a being of power without equal. The glowing began to change from red to bright gold as the light began to concentrate more on his tailbone area. And in a brilliant flash of light, 8 more tails appeared on Naruto, counting up to 9 tails in total. Another transformation was that fur began to grow on Naruto's arms and legs, from finger and toe tip, all the way up to elbows and knees, all while his nails on both hands and feet began to grow until they resembled claws. His fur color began to change as well, as it turned from its original burnt orange color into a rich golden color with black tips as markings began to appear on his fur and then climb up his skin, covering him with chakra as it did so until it covered all of him, and 6 tomos on his neckline, basically the first Kyuubi chakra mode except with tails. As Naruto began to wake, his senses were on alert, forcing him to wake up completely, breaking through his bindings, and standing in a ready stance as if he was ready to pounce at his prey. Warning. Feral God mode is activate. I repeat, Feral God mode is active. As the door opened, a 3-man squad of Root Anbu rushed into the lab and aimed to restrain Naruto and sedate him. However, Naruto had other plans. Growling at his enemies, Naruto lunged at the closest Anbu and roared as he his arm back and launched his fist at the Anbu. The Anbu was stunned by Naruto's actions that he didn't have the chance to evade Naruto's fist as it connected with the middle of his chest. The next thing everyone heard was a loud pop, rip, snap, and splooch, for Naruto's fist caused the ANBU's chest to cave in with such force that it caused everything in his chest to come rocketing out of his back, ripping through the muscle and skin, splitting his spine in half, and painting the wall red with his insides. Before the dead Anbu fell to the ground, Naruto spun on his heels and used his right claw and cut right through the Anbu on his left's neck, his head only staying on because of a small chunk of skin, and while still spinning, plunged his left arm into the Anbu on his right's chest, threw him up and behind him into the ceiling, ripping out his heart and implanting him in the ceiling from the force he was thrown at. All three were dead in not even 3 seconds. Naruto ran out the door only to come face to with another root Anbu, to the ANBU's horrible luck. Naruto grabbed the Anbu with his hand by the face and plunged his head into the wall. Naruto then looked down the hall and saw squads upon squads of root Anbu standing in his way to freedom. All to Naruto's rage. Naruto then let out a monstrous roar that caused a small earthquake, causing the Anbu to lose their balance, some falling down on the ground, and causing almost all of the ones standing to take a step back. After he finished roaring, and still holding the head of the Anbu he implanted into the wall, he ran towards the group of Anbu, dragging the poor bastard in the wall through it by his head. Even though they were trained not to feel any emotions, all the root Anbu wanted to shit bricks of tears in the presence of an enraged Hanyo Naruto, all while pitying their poor bastard of a teammate that was being dragged through a wall. When he was close enough, Naruto pulled the Anbu out of the wall and threw him back at the group, knocking their vanguards on the ground, and with his left created an orb of black, blue, and white chakra in the of his hand, before raising his palm, aiming it towards the group, and causing it to explode in a wide-range beam of pure energy, incinerating them all and destroying the hallway in a clean cone shape that went on for 25 meters before evaporating. Seeing that none escaped the blast, while the ones that did survive were too crippled to pose any interest to him, so ignored them and their cries of pain and ran off further into the facility. As he continued to run down the hallway, he continued his massacre of Anbu left and right, only leaving those that he sensed some light still in them, alive. While he was still in the lower levels, he came across a prison area where men, women, and even children were locked behind in bars. Using his newly gifted negative emotions sensing ability, he saw that all of them were innocent, their light still bright in their hearts, while the only negative emotion they all felt was that of sadness and fear. After killing the guards, he rushed over to each cell door and used his claws and tails to rip them open out of the wall. He saw when some of the female prisoners were free, they rushed over to the children and began to smother them and weeping in happiness and relief, obviously being the mothers of said children. For some unknown reason to him, he felt a pang of jealousy when he saw the children being smothered by their mothers. The prisoners continued to discuss with each other, trying to find a way to escape the facility in total. Naruto looked around the room until he saw that he missed a door. Going over, he ripped the door open with his claws, allowing the prisoners inside to be free. When they came out, he saw that the prisoners inside were 3 Anbu nins, but ones that didn't feel or smell like the ones that attacked them. One of the Anbu, adorning a tiger mask, looked at Naruto in confusion, but then jumped in shock when he recognized who the Hanyo was. Naruto. Is that you? The tiger-masked Anbu asked the feral boy, who only responded by tilting his head to the side in confusion. Some of the prisoners heard the name, looked at the boy, and gasped in shock when they recognized him, showing that they were villagers of the Leaf. Naruto, what happened to you? Who did this to? The tiger-masked Anbu continued, but stopped when one of the other Anbu, wearing an otter mask, placed a hand on his shoulder. Tora, this is obviously Danzo's doing. When he said Danzo's name, Naruto began to growl, remembering the hatred that Naruto held in his heart and how recalling the one of only memory that Naruto had before his feral transformation, Danzo, and his desire to see the man's bloody carcass. Remembering what he had to do, Naruto expanded his senses to find Danzo. When he found him, Naruto ran off, leaving everyone behind in a flash of golden orange light. When he reached the main chamber of the Foundation facility, Naruto looked up from the bottom floor towards one of the bridges that crossed the walls and saw the one man he could not hate like any other. Danzo Shimura stared down at Naruto with both awe and fear at the power the boy wielded. Naruto roared up at the bandaged man with uncontrolled rage that the earthquake he caused could be counted on a magnitude of 8 on the Richter scale. The walls of the main chamber cracked with massive webs and debris began to float up as Naruto continued to roar, his power seeming to skyrocket upwards, seemingly endless. The power continued to grow, but then a large portion of that power began to be channeled into his right arm. Before everyone's eyes, blood red and black chakra began to swell around Naruto's arm and began to condense around arm from hand to elbow. As the chakra began to settle, bone plates began to form from the chakra and surround the chakra. When it all settled, everyone was trembling in fear at the thing that encompassed Naruto's arm. The area where his hand should be was a large kitsune skull, with sharp rows of teeth. Bone plates surrounding the forearm within golden orange flames escaped through the cracks between each plate. A spiked spinal column adorned the top of the new arm cannon, looking both intimidating and deadly as it looked able to substitute as a blade. Naruto then raised his newly equipped kitsune arm cannon in Danzo's direction. When aimed directly at Danzo, the skull opened up, not like a regular jaw, but opened by separating from top to bottom, leaving it open by 10 inches. Orbs of white, blue, and red chakra began to coalesce in the space between the skull's jaws and began to form into a black sphere, starting at the size of an orange, then an apple, and finally to the size of a melon. If one were to look clearly at the orb, they would notice that the orb looked like it had a core made of molten lava, or also the fact that the top layers of the orb were spinning around the core in a chaotic order like a maelstrom. The small orb began to hiss as its core became brighter. One of the Anbu became aware of the unstable power behind the menacing sphere and the danger that it posed. He went over to Danzo's side to alert him of said danger. Danzo-sama, we must evacuate this facility immediately, the Anbu stated, snapping everyone out of their daze. But before they could act accordingly for an escape, the chaotic chakra orb in Naruto's kitsune arm cannon imploded in on itself and shot a straight stream of energy straight through Danzo's chest and into the ceiling above him, piercing through to the outside. What is this? What's happening to me? I can't use my Izanagi. Danzo looked back at Naruto and what he saw made his blood run cold and his skin want to turn a ghostly pale. For what Danzo saw was Naruto wearing a feral grin, one of a predator after it has caught its greatest prey, but also the fact at the base of the stream of energy that was piercing his chest, was a large amount of unused energy, waiting to be released. No, I refuse to die. I refuse to die by my own weapon. But his screams fell on deaf ears, for as soon as he stopped screaming, Naruto let out a final roar as he unleashed the last of the energy in his cannon, resulting in the stream to expand into a vicious beam a meter across in diameter, causing Danzo to begin disintegrating into the beam because of the raw energy behind it, till he was nothing more than dust in the wind. Even when Danzo was no more, the beam continued further up until it reached the top of the complex and began to drill through till at the surface, and like a beacon, shone in the night sky, alerting all of its overwhelming presence. As the moon's light shone through the hole that Naruto created through ceiling in the Foundation HQ, the entire complex began to shake uncontrollably as pieces of the ceiling began to fall, and the earth above with it. All throughout the complex, cave-ins were happening all over. When Naruto saw the hole in the ceiling growing in size, he ran up to the closest wall on all fours, and using pure speed, ran up it like a fox through a forest, dodging debris, collapsing bridges, and random explosions. What Naruto didn't notice as he ran up the wall, was that as he ran, his black markings and chakra cloak began to fade, as well as the golden color and tips of his fur were reverting back to their original burnt orange color. By the time Naruto reached the top of the new mile-long crater that seemed to run hundreds of meters down, he was exhausted, his golden orange chakra cloak completely gone. Naruto was sweating and panting with his tongue out like a dog trying to catch his breath. The changes that Naruto kept from the transformation were the claws on both of his hands and feet, the fur that surrounded said appendages, and the 9 tails, but now his fur was back to its original burnt orange color without any tips. When Naruto looked around him, he saw the group of prisoners that he saved on the other side of the crater, all of them accountable and okay. Finally catching his breath, he had to shield his eyes from a bright flash that appeared in front of him, seemingly out of nowhere. When the light dimmed down, Naruto set his gaze at what seemed to be floating blue crystal, about the size and width of his forefinger. Then, without warning, the crystal blasted off, heading towards the west from what his instincts told him. Naruto, in his new feral state, decided to run after the shiny thing, and continued chasing it into a dense forest. He continued chasing after it on all fours, his tails wagging behind him in excitement and glee. He found it fun to chase the shiny. After what seemed like an hour of running, but was only a few minutes, Naruto began to feel tired from the strain of his previous power-up, feral rampage, and chasing the shiny thing. Naruto looked around him and saw a large oak tree with some of its roots up from the ground. He could tell that the ground under the roots was loose, so he went over to the tree and began to dig. The job was fairly quick. It took Naruto only minutes, but he had successfully managed to make a den for himself 2.5 meters wide and deep. By the time he was done, Naruto was officially exhausted and all he wanted to do was sleep. Doing some last adjustments to make sure that his den won't cave in on him, he curled himself up into a ball, using his tails as a pillow and a blanket to keep himself comfortable in his sleep, whining silently from the hunger he was beginning to feel and being alone with no one around him. He drifted off to sleep, not noticing the floating crystal at the entrance of his den, or the fact that he had successfully made his den in the personal 100-acre forest of the Hyuga clan. Hiruzen Sarutobi, the Sandaime Hokage, the shinobi no kami of Konohagakure no Sato, was both exhausted and utterly frustrated. Just moments ago, a team of ninja with the mission to find one Uzumaki Naruto, the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Yoko, a boy he loved as a second godson, and had been missing for 3 months now, and they had nothing. Not even a clue to where he had disappeared to. Hiruzen began to suspect that the ninjas he sent on the search mission to find Naruto didn't even try or want to find the young boy. He even suspected that some may have sabotaged the trail they once had to make sure that no one found the lost Uzumaki. At least he could trust some people with finding the lost boy. Kakashi Hatake, Yugao Azuki, and Anko Mitarashi. Kakashi felt he needed to find Naruto. He saw the boy as the little brother he never had and felt like that he failed Minato and Kushina, 2 people he looked to as a father and mother when he lost his, and felt he was failing them for not protecting their son better. Yugao and Anko had similar feelings. They along with Kurenai were in an all-kunoichi team under Kushina, before Orochimaru pulled Anko out for apprenticeship, but they all looked to her as the mother they never had, thus making Naruto their Ototo. They were the only team that went searching for the boy and came back with something that could help find Naruto, a trail of blonde hair and a little blood. However, their trail went cold a few days afterwards because of a flash rainstorm that lasted 3 days. Rubbing his temples, he told an Anbu to go and collect the 3 to look in a distinctive area he believed would lead them to Naruto. From what he gathered in the data and leads that he got from the teams he knew he could trust, they might find something that could lead them to Naruto in the outskirts to the east. When the Anbu came back into the office, he was with Kakashi in his Anbu gear with the Inu mask at his hip, Yugao in her Anbu attire wearing the Neko mask, and Anko wearing her usual attire. The look in each one of their eyes was one of a hardened and told him that they would do matter what to find their lost brother and bring him home, or die trying. He debriefed them on what they were going to do and where they would go, should they find a trail, follow it. He was about to send them out when the entire village was shaken by a small earthquake, small, yet powerful. Pictures on the walls fell off, and the paper and scroll stack he had on his desk fell over. After everyone had settled, Hiruzen told everyone to follow him to the HQ of the village response team to see if there was any danger. When he got there, he looked around and saw Chunin, Jonin, and Anbu together working together to gather reports of the earthquake. He walked up to the main lobby where 4 sensory ninja were concentrating on a large sphere of water where a small ripple was showing. Report. Hokage-sama, as of 7:33 p.m., the village was hit by an earthquake with a magnitude of 4 on the Richter scale. However, from what we can tell you is that this earthquake was not of natural origin. Explain. Sir, from what we can tell, the epicenter of the earthquake, the focal point is only about 240 meters below sea level, and also, we are detecting above cage level chakra from the epicenter as well. Can you show us where the epicenter was specifically? Of course, Hokage-sama. The group was led to a console with a map of the village and the area around it. The response team member pressed a couple keys on the console keyboard and a crosshairs appeared on the console screen. The crosshairs and the map began to move around, until it settled on an area a couple miles east of the village, the same area where he was going to send Kakashi, Yugao, and Anko to go look for Naruto. Hiruzen was shocked at this and was about to tell the 3 ninjas behind him to go to the area immediately and search for Naruto. But before he could utter the words, the village as a whole, and the area around for miles was hit by another earthquake, a magnitude of 8, and this one carried a distinctive roar with it in the wind. A roar that told everyone's instincts to run. When everyone recovered, they were brought to attention by one of the sensory nin's fearful voice. BBB Biju level chakra detected. APPROXAMITLY 2 to 3 miles out of the village. Kakashi, you and your team are to go and scout out the area and see what the bloody hell is going on. I don't know what the hell is going on, but get your teams moving, now. I don't know how, but I know that this has to be Naruto related. Hokage-sama. The chakra Signiture, a part of it is similar to the Kyuubi's, BB, but the level is at least twice as strong than it was 13 years ago. Okay, now I know it's Naruto related. Kakashi, take your team and go. You guys may want to see this. When they heard Kakashi's voice from the outside, everyone rushed out to see what he was staring at. When they got outside, they saw Kakashi point up into the sky to show what he was looking up at. What they saw shocked them to their very core. Coming straight up from the earth was a small sliver of a beam that one could tell was very powerful for something so small. Then, without notice, the beam expanded, shouting even further up into the heavens. When the beam faded, there was a gaping hole in the clouds that the beam pierced, showing more of the night sky through it. Everyone that saw and heard the beam were all stunned and frightened by the raw power the beam showed. Snapping out of his shock, the Hokage addressed everyone and gave them all orders to address the event they just saw. Response team, I want you to send a squad to the village gates and get them closed. I want this village on lockdown as soon as possible. Kakashi, your team is on standby. When you are sent to go and investigate that area, I'm going with you. Anbu, I want. Hiruzen was about to say more, but was interrupted when an Anbu adorning a fox mask appeared kneeling in front of him. Forgive me, Hokage-sama, but it seems that the civilian council has called an emergency meeting and all council members are to attend immediately. The harpy is on a rant about Naruto again. When the last words reached the Hokage's ears, Hiruzen let out an exhausted sigh. Hiruzen had a bad feeling that this meeting will be extremely troublesome. Thank you, Kitsune. Can you finish what I was planning and set up teams to begin securing the village? Taka, If the response team has any further reports about the earthquake, chakra signature, or whatever the hell is going on in my village, bring the report with you to the council meeting please. Hi, Hokage-sama. Alright, Kakashi, Yugao, Anko, you are with me. Once the damn meeting is done, I want to go and look for Naruto-kun. Hi. Good. I'm getting too old for this council shit. 10 minutes later. Village Council Room. The Konoha Village Council Room is located in the middle floor of the Hokage Tower. Inside, the room is divided by 3 tables, one medium-sized table in the middle, and 2 long tables on each side. The long tables had 12 seats each and the middle one only had 1 seat. Seated on the middle table was the Hokage. On his right sat the Shinobi Council, led by the clans of Konoha, Akamichi, Yamanaka, Nara, Aburame, Inuzuka, Hyuga, Kurama, Sarutobi, Uchiha, Namikaze, Uzumaki, and Senju. However, 4 of the seats were empty, waiting for the day they are once more occupied by their rightful owners. Only 1 seat had a steward, the Uchiha, stewarded by Shimura Danzo, but today, even his seat was vacant. I wonder why. On the other table sat the Civilian Council, occupied by 10 high-class civilians who held too much sway when it came to how Konoha ran. The other 2 seats of the civilian side was occupied by the Hokage's advisors, Udatane Kaharu and Mitokado Homura. And today, one of those pompous, high-class civilian bitches was screeching up a storm. I'm telling you, the demon has returned. It needs to be executed. We need to hunt it down and kill it before it gets any stronger. Mebuki Haruno, mother of one Sakura Haruno, screeched out into the council room. And just like the rest of the civilian council, was a firm Naruto hater, even funding some of the fox hunts that was held on Naruto's birthday, all for the sake of giving the poor kids life hell through mental, emotional, and even physical torture. Haruno, please be quiet, your voice is really troublesome for all of our ears. Guess who? What did you say? Troublesome. Enough. Haruno, I believe we have heard enough of your request, and I can firmly say that your request is denied. So would you please kindly, shut the up. Hiruzen ordered her from his seat in a tone of voice that showed that he was heavily annoyed and furious with the woman. After he saw Mebuki take back her seat and the rest of the council. Now, as I was going to say before Mrs. Haruno decided to voice her opinion on this matter, I will say that Konoha will not send parties out to hunt who or whatever created that beam earlier down, and kill it. I will however send out teams to find out who or what created that beam and secure it, but I will not order my ninja to attack for their own safety. What do you mean, Hiruzen? Kaharu asked as she looked at her old teammate and tried to read his reasons. What I mean, Kaharu, is that when we got a solid reading of the signature's power level, it was 2x stronger than that of the Kyuubi no Kitsunes that attacked 13 years ago, and it was still growing. When he said the last part, murmurs of panic started exploding on both sides of the council, and the screeching started again. Then why aren't you going try and kill it? You just said that its power was growing. We need to kill it before it becomes too strong. Seal it into a child again if you have to. We can. The bitch was silenced however when Hiruzen slammed his palms on the table, causing it to nearly split in half, and stood abruptly in the room, releasing a suffocating amount of killing intent to shut everyone up. Kusalwoman Haruno, are you suggesting that I seal whatever caused that beam into a child? Just so you can kill it? Along with ending the child's life? If that was what you were suggesting, then thank you for volunteering your daughter's life to have sealed and killed to end this, so-called, demon. What? You can't. Then silence yourself, Haruno. Hiruzen ordered her in a tone of voice that some remembered him using back during the first 2 shinobi wars. Not wanting to suffer any unnecessary wounds, Mebuki sat back down in her chair. Now, as I was saying, I and a squad of my choosing were going to go and search the area for what caused that beam, where it came from, and why it's here. we have some suspicion as to who caused the beam, but I personally want to make sure of it to be certain. By the way, has anyone seen Danzo? He's dead, Hokage-sama. I saw Naruto incinerate that till his old was nothing but dust, and then destroyed his precious laboratory, taking the root Anbu that was still under his command with it. Everyone turned towards the door that was in front of the council tables. Standing in the doorway was a tall man clad in Anbu gear that was worn and torn, but still in wearable condition. Covering the man's face was a cracked mask, designed to resemble the face of a tiger. Kakashi was the first to recognize who the man was. Shinji, you're alive. Damn right. That son of bitch had me, Kawazo Otter, and Hato Dove kidnapped and taken to that facility of his when we found out all of his dirty little secrets. Was about to finally stick needles into me today until Naruto so gloriously him up. Wait, Naruto killed him. What the hell happened? Hiruzen asked in shock. You mean besides the part where Danzo kidnapped the kid, experimented on him to turn him into the ideal weapon, with his seal, experiment on his cells while he was awake, turned the poor kid into a Hanyo, and had a Yamanaka screw with his mind to try breaking him. By the way, that kid has an indomitable will as strong as chakra steel, the kid kept telling them to off, only after 3 months of constant torture did he look like he was going to break, and I mean torture that makes Ibiki cringe. At that everyone shivered, but most of them couldn't because of the shock that they were feeling from what they just heard happen to Naruto. Everything they heard made them start to feel sick, nothing they heard of just now should have happened to any child. They could only begin to imagine the kind of cruelty the boy had to go through. The only people not affected by the news were the civilian council, who looked slightly pleased by it instead. Is there more? Yup. And this is it. I'm not going to show you the stuff of when they tried to break the poor kid's will. But, I will show you where it gets good. But I'm not going to tell you anymore. Kind of glad Danzo had such an uptight security system. He had a set of cameras in his secret research facility, specifically set to monitor Naruto. Shinji then produced a DVD from his back supply patch and went over to the large TV and DVD player that was conveniently in the corner of the room. He put the DVD and pressed play. When the DVD started, it showed room Naruto was in, and him tied down to the table in his Hanyo state, looking up at the mirror with dead eyes, hearing his words that he sent to Kami-sama. In the council room they heard Yugao shout out, Ototo, before falling on her knees weeping and holding her sides, Anko by her side, trying to comfort her while she also had some tears in her own eyes. Kakashi was also standing by them, shaking, but he wasn't sad, no, he was royally pissed, just like Hiruzen was. Everyone's attention went back to the screen when they saw Naruto's attention shoot up, and then close his eyes. Everyone continued to look at the screen for a minute. They saw that he began glowing. When they saw his transformation begin and then finish, everyone was shocked at his new Kyuubi Hanyu state. They were in even more shock when he freed himself and then killed the 3 Anbu with ease in a brutal yet fluid action, as if it was choreographed. Their shock, and the civilians' fear grew more when they saw how Naruto was massacring everyone around, only sparing little to none root Anbu, and then when freeing the prisoners, they especially took notice at how stable he was around them, nor showing an ounce of hostility, only showing curiosity towards them. Their eyes grew more in size when Naruto ran off away from the group of prisoners in a flash of light, reminding some that knew whose son he was of the Hiraishin no Jutsu. Their shock couldn't grow any further when Naruto confronted and roared at Danzo, causing the magnitude 8 earthquake they experienced earlier in the night. However, they were wrong about their shock though when Naruto's arm transformed into his Kitsune arm cannon. Even from the screen, they could feel the power coming off of the orb in the jaws of the cannon and were awed and fearful when it fired, killing Danzo and causing the whole base to become unstable. As they saw the base cave in on itself from all the damage it took, especially after Naruto unknowingly destroyed all the supports of the facility, they fully realized what Naruto just did. that he had just single-handedly destroyed and permanently eliminated a secret organization working in the shadows that they thought didn't exist anymore. The video continued as they saw Naruto running up the wall on all fours, just as if he were a fox, and running up towards the collapsing ceiling, seeing pieces of metal, glass, and rock falling all around him. They would have continued to watch more, but couldn't as a rock destroyed the camera, cutting the feed, causing the screen to become distorted. Shinji turned the lights back on in the room, went up to the player and took the disc out, before turning back to everyone in the room, laughing quietly at the looks on their faces, especially the civilians. Shish Shinji, do you know where he went? Hiruzen said, barely getting over the shock he gained from witnessing Naruto, the boy who he saw as a second grandson, perform such brutal, yet well-deserved justice on a group of traitors that he didn't know still existed. The last time I saw him was when he was chasing after some sort of glowing crystal. He looked like he was enjoying chasing it through the forest. Hokage-sama, I'm sorry to tell you this, but Naruto has gone feral. He was following his instincts, he didn't even recognize me, and I was one of the ones who brought him food and treated his wounds when he was little. So if you were going to go off looking for him, I would recommend you get someone that is calm around and someone who doesn't have any violent emotions towards him. It seems he can feel emotions, otherwise we might have a very pissed off fox on our hands. After saying those words, another Anbu, wearing a hawk mask, burst into the room holding a clipboard to his chest. Hokage-sama, we have news about the chakra signature. We think you stole Shinji. Is that you? I thought you were dead. Join the club, Taka. Nice to see you again by the way. Taka, you said you had news for us. Huh, oh, yeah, I do. We got a hold of the signature again. It fell back down to just about mid-cage level and currently is in a single position. We believe it to be either sleeping or resting right now. Where is it, Taka? It's currently in the Hyuga forest. What? Hearing which forest the boy went into, Hiyashi could only pray that no one pissed the boy off. Alright, Kakashi, Yugao, Anko, Tora, Hiyashi, we're going to go into that forest to look for Naruto. None of you are allowed to attack him. We need to treat this with care, and pray to Kami-sama that he doesn't treat us like hostiles. Hi, alright, let's go. Meeting adjourned. Hyuga compound. 5 minutes after beam event. Hinata Hyuga was walking out of her room in her light blue nightgown after being awoken by the earthquake. She also was one of the many villagers who witnessed the beam go into the sky and was awed by its power. During the time she was watching the beam from her bedroom window, her mother came in to check in on her. They both watched as the beam died down, leaving its damage to the clouds behind. Shikamaru shed a tear as he saw the innocent cloud get pierced by the beam. Her mother told her she was going to go check on her sister, telling her it was alright. Hinata saw her mother leave and closed the door behind her. She went back to her window and continued to look out for any more surprises until after a few minutes, she saw something flashing and glowing in her family's forest. She rushed out of her room, curious as to what it was outside in the forest. When she got outside, she saw the glowing and flashing and headed towards it. She did her best to make sure she didn't step on any sharp rocks, lest her bare feet get cut, and as well as make sure she doesn't trip on any loose tree roots that decided not to stay in the ground. By the time she saw what was making the glowing light, she was stunned by the sight of a beautiful blue crystal that was floating in mid-air. Her hand reached out to touch the crystal, but before it could, the crystal began to move away from her very quickly until it was meters away from her, but the strange thing about its movement was that it acted like it wanted her to follow. She walked slowly after it, but then it began to move faster into the forest. Hey, wait for me. Hinata chased after the crystal and danced around any swift turns it made while she went after it. When she finally caught up to it, it stopped at the base of a tree, and what looked like a hole that led into a large fox den. She looked at Crystal and saw it float into the den. Curious about the floating stone, she went to the entrance and crawled in. The den was dark, but she could see some light in the den as well, possibly the light from the crystal. Her eyes were adjusting to the low lighting. She looked around and saw the crystal floating around the back area of the den. As her eyes finally got used to the new lighting, she saw that the crystal was floating over what seemed to be a huge ball of orange fur, but when she looked close and listened, she could see it was both rising and falling like it was breathing, and she could hear rasped breathing and some whimpering. Hello, is anyone in here? She asked, and after she did, she noticed a pair of long rabbit-like ears peeked up from the ball, listening in her direction. The ball began to move slowly, showing that the fur around it was actually the tails that wrapped themselves around their body. When Hinata looked at the creature that the tails belonged to, she noticed that the creature had a humanoid body shape, but its hands and feet were replaced by claws. When she looked at the creature in more detail, she noticed that the color of its fur was burnt orange, but its hair was bright blonde, but she soon gasped when she looked at its face. On its face were 6 deep whisker marks, 3 on each cheek, but her shock came from the color of its eyes, which were a beautiful azure blue, not even tainted by the slitted pupil. She realized who exactly the creature was. Naruto-kun, Hinata said in shock. For 3 whole months, Anbu have been looking for him. She even went on her own to some of the places she thought he would be, but to no avail. But now, she finally found him in a large den under one of the old oak trees in her family's forest. But something caught her nose. When she sniffed a couple of times, she caught a whiff of what she could tell was iron, and as she looked at Naruto moving around, she noticed that he was wincing and whimpering as he moved his left side. Putting 2 and 2 together, she realized that Naruto had a large injury on his left side from the amount of iron that she smelled. Naruto-kun, please follow me? Hinata asked in her soft voice. Hearing her speak, Naruto felt himself relaxed under its gentleness, its softness bringing warmth to his chest. Giving her his trust, Naruto followed her out of the den and into the forest. Once out, Naruto winced and whimpered as he moved more towards Hinata. When she saw him in pain, she told him to stop. She moved towards him and was about to check his left side to see how bad of a wound he had. But as she reached her hand over, she heard Naruto giving off a low growl at her action. Shocked at him growling at her, she retracted her arm and looked at him in the eyes, her eyes filled with concern, care, and love, staring into cautious, defensive, and hurt eyes. Please Naruto-kun, I need to see how badly why you're hurt so I can help you. So please trust me, I would never want to hurt you. She said once more in her soft angelic voice, once more bring that warmth in his chest. Naruto's ears dropped down so that they resting closer to his head, and his guard dropped, allowing her to get closer to her and his wound. Seeing him giving her more of his trust, Hinata smiled happily at him, thus making him give her a weak smile in return. Hinata then went over to his left side, and then she finally realized that he was bare-chested. Blushing slightly at the sight of his upper, she shook her head to get the thoughts out of her head to get back to the task at hand, which also caused Naruto to look at her in confusion. Going back to checking his wounds after her temporary interruption, she looked at his, and to her fears, there was indeed a wound on him, and a very large one at it. On his left side, there was a large jagged gash running down from his elbow into above his hip, followed by some smaller, but more manageable cuts. She also noticed that even thought the wound wasn't deep, but could cause him to bleed out, he wasn't. She could see that he was paler than he should have been, and malnourished, but he was not showing any symptoms of bleeding out. She also noticed that the skin and muscle in and around the cut was healing at an incredible rate, but for some reason, seemed restrained from advancing further to fully heal him. Seeing she didn't bring anything to help treat his wounds, she asked him to follow her again to her house to heal his wounds. Whimpering slightly, his ears lowering themselves further towards the sides of his head, but then resolved himself by following, walking on all fours, and his tails low to the ground in pain as he slightly agitated his wound as he moved. When they reached the main compound, she went over to the largest house, a large 3-story Japanese-themed construct, with paper windows and doors. She went to the back door and opened it wide, turning back towards him and telling him to follow. Naruto followed her into the house and continued to do so as she opened doors, went down hallways. After a minute of walking and going up the stairs, they reached Hinata's room. The doors into the rooms of the house were solid wooden frames with handles to help slide them open, and a locking mechanism on the other side. When she opened the door, she told him to go on inside. He walked in, but before she could follow in behind him, the door from down the hallway opened, allowing the light from the other side to flood into the unlit hall. Panicking, Hinata turned to her door and closed it shut fast, making sure not to close it on any of Naruto's tails. When she turned back around, she came face to face with a woman who looked like an older version of herself, the woman's bangs reaching down, draping lower on her shoulders, her hair reaching down to her waist, a lavender, cream-trimmed nightgown showing off her curvaceous body and E-cupped. The woman in front of Hinata basically looked like a goddess amongst women. Her hand on the door frame as she looked over at her daughter with concern. Hinata-chan, what is with all the noise right now? It's already past your bedtime. You don't want to be late for school tomorrow, do you? Hinata's mother, Hitomi, said with her soft and motherly tone. Just like Hinata, some people viewed Hitomi as being too soft and kind to people, but those that really knew her knew and remembered that when the time calls for it, she could become a mighty lioness, especially when her children are concerned. Hinata smiled at her mother and apologized if she made any noise that woke her up. Oh, don't worry, sweetie, you didn't wake me. I've been awake since that earthquake. I'm still surprised nothing broke. But anyways, sweetie, you should go to bed. Hi Ka-chan. Oyasumi. Oyasumi Hinata-chan, sleep tight. After saying their goodnights, Hitomi and Hinata went back to their respective rooms. When Hinata entered her room, she saw Naruto sitting crossed-legged in the middle of it, looking straight up at the floating crystal from earlier, floating above him. When heard the door open, Naruto turned around and looked at Hinata with a small smile. She smiled back at him in return, and went over to her closet. When she opened it, inside were 2 shelves that reached up to 7 feet high to 7 feet across. The top shelf had some boxes on it, with some room to spare, obviously used to store some of her precious items. Her middle shelf was split in half directly down the middle by a barrier of wood 2 inches thick. The left side had a pole that crossed from around the top of the barrier to the other side of the closet wall, hangers of some of her clothes and outfits hanged up by the pole. The other side of her shelf was filled up by a cupboard with 3 drawers, each one labeled as lotions, creams, and bombs. Hinata opened up the creams drawer and pulled out a small container. She took the container with her over to Naruto, and when she kneeled down beside him, he turned his left side more towards her, showing her he understood her intentions and trusted her with handling it her way. Hinata smiled at his trust in her before looking at the container she had in her hand. Before opening it, dipped 2 of her fingers in the cream and held them up. Okay Naruto-kun, this may sting a little, so please bear with it a little please. Hinata said pleadingly to him with a slight blush on her face by being in such proximity of him. Naruto looked at her before giving a small grunt and nod of his head that he understood. Hinata nodded back at him before moving her fingers towards his wounds, and began rubbing the cream around and a little in his wounds. When he felt the cream enter and touch his wounds, Naruto began wincing and whimpering at this and looked at her pleadingly, unconsciously activating an S-ranked kinjutsu on Hinata. When Hinata looked into Naruto's face, Naruto was staring back into her face while unknowingly using the puppy dog eyes no jutsu, whimpering version, and it seemed he was a natural. Hinata felt her heart want to break at the sight of such a cute yet sad face. The tails and the ears weren't helping either. All she wanted to do was grab the Hanyo and just hug, screaming out, "Kawaii!" and giving him anything he wanted, just so he wouldn't make that sad face again. Restraining herself from such actions, Hinata resolved herself to not succumb to the power of the cuteness, and thankfully, she succeeded. "I'm sorry, Naruto-kun. I know it stings, but please bear with it. Just a little longer and we'll be done, okay?" Hinata said with a reassuring smile, trying her best to make Naruto stop making that face at her. Even though she found it cute, she knew its dangers from both seeing her mother and sister using on Hiyashi, and the time she accidentally used it on Hiyashi as well to get some cinnamon rolls. After hearing her reassurance, Naruto looked down and closed his eyes tight, allowing Hinata to treat him without any interruption on his part. Same time, Hyuga main house front door. Hiruzen, Hiyashi, Kakashi, Yugao, Anko, and Shinji were originally rushing towards the Hyuga clan's private forest in the back of the compound, but when they were close to his house, Hiyashi asked the Hokage and group if he could check in on his family. They understood that the man wanted to make sure they were okay and warn them about what was happening. They told him it was all right, and they followed the man to his house. Performing a few hand signs, and putting some chakra on the door, revealing a security seal matrix being temporarily disabled. Hiyashi opened the door, and invited everyone inside. Once inside, he told them that they could wait for him at the back door after he checked in on his family. They were about to move to said door, until their attention was brought to the sound of footsteps coming down the stairs. When they looked towards the stairs, they saw one Hitomi Hyuga walking gracefully down in her nightgown, a smile on her face when her eyes fell upon Hiyashi, but then turned into a confused when she saw the Hokage. 3 Anbius, and Anko were with him as well. "Welcome home, Hiyashi-kun. Is everything alright? Why is the Hokage and his Anbu with you?" Hitomi asked as she looked at her husband with confused eyes. Seeing that his wife wanted an answer, Hiyashi turned towards Hiruzen and looked at him with a silent question. When Hiruzen gave him a nod telling him it was alright to tell her, Hiyashi turned back towards Hitomi. "Hitomi-chan, you and the girls felt the earthquake and saw that beam of light earlier, correct?" "Of course, Hiyashi-kun. I think everyone at least felt that earthquake, let alone that beam." "Hitomi-chan, the reason why I am with the Hokage and his Anbu is because early tonight, we recently discovered that Danzo Shimura was behind Uzumaki Naruto's disappearance. I can't tell you everything that happened to him, but I can tell you that Danzo experimented on Naruto and caused him to become a Hanyo. That earthquake and the beam that occurred earlier were some of the aftermath of him using his newfound power while in a state of pure rage. We are here because, after destroying Danzo's facility, Naruto ran off into the forest, and from what the barrier team has discovered is that he is somewhere in the family's forest." Taking everything in, Hitomi is saddened to hear that such things happened to her best friend's son. Resolving herself, she steeled her eyes and began making her request to help look for the lost boy, never noticing a small figure in the upstairs hallway creeping towards Hinata's room. Hinata's room. After a couple of minutes of dabbing, rubbing, and whimpers, Hinata finished applying her special cream that she made with her mother's help. The cream she used on Naruto was a special type of cream that when applied, both cleaned any wound it touched, and acted as a strong antibiotic to help fight off any possible infections. Another property about cream was that it also acted as a bolster for cells to undergo mitosis, increasing the regeneration time for a wound to fully heal. What Hinata didn't know was that by introducing the cream to Naruto's blood and system, caused one of Naruto's regeneration factor to reignite, but 10x stronger than it previously was. Hinata watched in fascination as all the cuts and bruises started to disappear in mere seconds. She also noticed that his biggest wound, the gash on his left side, was healing just as fast, and as the skin and muscle regenerated, tiny bits of stone, glass, and splinters that she missed were being pushed out as well. In only 3 seconds, he was fully healed, not a single scar or blemish to be seen. It was perfect instant regeneration. Feeling a difference in his side, Naruto looked at his left and saw that he was completely healed. He turned his attention towards Hinata, seeing as she was the one who made him feel better. Acting on pure happiness, Naruto glomped Hinata and started hugging while yipping and purring in both relief and happiness that she helped get rid of his pain. Hinata was shocked as she felt her feral crush hugging her while rubbing his whiskered cheek against her own, all while releasing yips and purrs in his happiness. He continued to do so, but suddenly stopped. Hinata looked at Naruto in confusion, only to see that his blue eyes were slightly glazed over. Naruto stopped show of affection towards Hinata when he caught a whiff of her scent. She smelled like lavender and vanilla, with only a touch of cinnamon. His sensitive nose may have disliked many smells, but for some reason, he liked her scent. He really liked her scent. Acting on pure instinct, Naruto began sniffing around Hinata's neck, stopping right over her left shoulder. Hinata was about to question him on what he was doing, but before she could even open her mouth to ask, Naruto opened his own, showing off his long canines, and then plunged them into her shoulder, piercing the skin, but only enough to draw a little blood. Somewhere on the stairway to heaven, Kurama was walking up the stairway, adorned in a white kimono, his left hand holding onto the sash that kept both parts of the kimono together, and his right holding onto one of a stick that went over his shoulder and had a blue polka dot styled makeshift bag on the other side. He walking peacefully until a familiar feeling ran through him. My fatherly kitsune senses are tingling. Naruto did something to make me proud right now. Back in Hinata's room, Hinata gave off a slight whimper as she felt Naruto bite her. She also felt some of his chakra entering into her as well. Hearing whimper, Naruto released the bite and started licking the tiny wound he created. Almost instantly, the bite was healed, but not without leaving a mark. On her shoulder, where Naruto bit her, was not a scar, but rather what seemed to be a tattoo of a small fox paw, orange in color right where Naruto impaled his teeth. Naruto then turned his attention to Hinata's face and saw the tears running down her cheeks. Not liking to see her cry, Naruto started licking the tears away, causing Hinata to giggle as ticklish to his licking ministrations. After hearing giggle, Naruto looked into her eyes and gave her a big vulpine grin before resuming his hugging of her while his tails were wagging around happily and playfully. Hinata giggled at feeling his affection towards her, not feeling an ounce of shyness from his ministrations and open affection to her. She just wanted to enjoy it. A little before Naruto's playful ministrations, Hitomi, Hiashi, Hiruzen, Kakashi, Anko, Yugao, and Shinji were heading towards the back door of the house after getting some flashlights and bandages just in case. Hiashi was about to open the door, but they were all stopped when they heard a young girl speak loudly behind them. Okawa-chan, Hinata Oni-chan has a fox boy in her room and is playing with him. Can we keep him? Hanabi Hyuga, a 7-year-old little girl, youngest daughter to Hiashi and Hitomi, and Hinata's little sister. Hanabi was standing on the top of the staircase and peered her head over to look at her mother. When the whole group heard what the girl asked, their brains slowly started working until they comprehended what was going on. Naruto's in Hinata's room. Each one of the adults immediately rushed back up the stairs, minding to make sure they don't push Hanabi and hurt, but she actually followed them to her sister's room. When they reached the door to Hinata's room, Hitomi opened the door quickly and were soon introduced to a volley of giggles and yips. In the middle of the room, on the floor, rolling around was one Hinata Hyuga and rolling with was one very hanyofied Naruto Uzumaki. The both of them were rolling around and tickling each other, Naruto using his whiskered cheek to tickle hers, and his tails to tickle her sides, slightly lifting up her nightgown by accident. Hinata also retaliated against him by tickling his sides, petting and tickling his tails, or scratching his rabbit-like fox ears. The giant smiles on their faces showed just how much fun the two of them were having together. Their fun stopped, however, when they heard someone clearing their throat. Turning towards the door, they saw 7 adults, 2 of them being Hinata's parents, the other ones being Anbu, another being some woman she didn't recognize, and the last being the Hokage. She also saw her little sister in the doorway looking confused at her. Looking at her situation and what it could be interpreted as, she started blushing all types of new reds, and stuttering like a motorboat. Naruto, being the feral boy he was, looked at the group dead in the eyes, and he then did something so amazing that they, Hiruzen, Kakashi, and Shinji, were amused with the scene in front of them. Hitomi, Anko, and Yugao found the scene cute and adorable. Hanabi was utterly confused with what was going on. And Hiyashi was mad and had the desire to go into his office to retrieve the family sword. Why was everyone reacting differently, you may ask? Well, the reason was because, in front of them, sitting on the couch, was one Hinata Hyuga, was sporting a blush that needed to be recorded as a new color of red, and next to her was one Naruto Uzumaki. Now, in some cases, it wouldn't be noted surprising that the two could sit together without Hinata fainting from the close proximity, but she should really be fainting from how close Naruto was being with her. What the group was witnessing at the moment was Naruto and Hinata, sitting on a couch in the living room of the clan head's house, but were watching as Naruto was leaning towards Hinata and rub his head affectionately against her, once in a while brushing his cheek against hers. Hinata was on the borderline of fainting and going supernova from embarrassment, and it only made it worse that her family was seeing this. She is still in her nightgown, but is wearing her baggy sweater as well. They were all sitting in the living room after going over how Hinata found Naruto, brought him back after seeing he was injured, healing his wounds, and the embarrassing event where everyone saw them in the middle of a tickle war, but could have been interpreted as something else. So, we know how you found him, but something is bothering me. Hinata, why aren't you afraid of Naruto-kun's new form? It seemed, and still seems, that you're not even scared of him. Why? Shinji stated as he looked at the two on the couch, his voice a little more serious. Well, Anbu-san, I will admit that, at first, I was startled by Naruto-kun's new appearance, but I knew he was still Naruto-kun, and I couldn't stand to see him in pain. Even now, I can tell that a little bit of Naruto-kun is still in him, even if he is a little more, animalistic. Hitomi helped her daughter finish her sentence. Hi. Well, all seems well. You did a fine job healing him, Hinata-chan. But aren't you a little curious as to why Naruto appears as he does right now? Hiruzen asked as he kept his gaze on the two children. Anyo, does it have anything to do with the Kyuubi? After she said those words, all the adults had shocked expressions, and Hanabi had a curious expression. What they didn't see thought was that Naruto reacted to the nickname his surrogate father had acquired in the past, and a pained feeling shot in his heart. Hinata-chan. How did you find out? Hitomi asked her eldest in shock. The elders told me. When they learned that Naruto-kun was in my class, they told me about the Kyuubi no Kitsune sealed inside of him, although, they said that he was the demon when I asked about how he was related to the Kyuubi. But I knew in my heart they were wrong. The adults were mad at the elders for trying to make such a sweet girl hate a boy who had no say or control in how obtained his burden. What the elders didn't know, was that I had met Naruto-kun before. When I first met him, he saved me from a group of bullies that wanted to humiliate, and I think hurt me because I was a Hyuga. Naruto-kun came and saved me, but he ended up hurt because of me. I couldn't even help him because Ko took me away before I could. Ever since then, I watched Naruto-kun, I wanted to see how he was able to put up a smile, no matter what hardship he endured. I learned though that the smile he wore, W was nothing more T than a masked T to hide his pain. So when the elders told me he W was a demon, I knew they were wrong. How, daughter? Hiyashi asked with curiosity. Because Otu-sama, demons don't cry. When she said that, everyone couldn't help but put on a smile with the logic that Hinata was using. Her parents were proud to see that their daughter wasn't blinded by rumors and bad reputation, but actually judged by her own opinion and with her own eyes. Hiruzen was especially happy to see that such a kind-hearted girl showed such care towards Naruto. Although sad of what happened to the boy he considered a second grandson, he was glad that he was found and taken care of by the girl next to him. Oni-chan, why are you saying that Naruto is the big bad fox? Naruto's a good fox, isn't he? He was playing with you and was making you smile and laugh earlier. So why do you say he is bad fox? Hanabi asked, reminding everyone that she was there, and also in earshot of the S-ranked secret that they were speaking. Hanabi-chan, Naruto-kun isn't the bad fox, as you say. What he is what is called a Jinchuriki, meaning the power of human sacrifice. No one knows why they are called that. It was a name that the first Jinchurikis started calling themselves. Naruto-kun in a way is a storage scroll, while the Kyuubi is a kunai that we seal in the scroll, so that we are safe from harm from the kunai hurting us. Do you understand, Hanabi-chan? Hiruzen said in a grandfatherly tone as he explained the situation to the young girl. I get it. Naruto keeps us safe by keeping the Kyuubi away in him, and since Otu-sama told me about how the scroll is still the scroll even with the kunai in it, that means Naruto is still Naruto, right? Yes, you are right. Hiruzen said, proud of the little girl, just like everyone else in the room for understanding the difference between the Kyuubi and Naruto. Hiruzen sent his gaze back to Naruto and Hinata. When his gaze landed on Naruto, he saw that he was resting his head on Hinata's lap, a small smile plastered on his face with a single tear coming down his eye. Curiosity was getting the better of him as he pondered why Naruto was reacting in such a way. Ideas and hypotheses were running through his head, but then he decided to ask Hinata, as she seemed to be able to communicate on some level with him. Hinata-chan, how are you able to communicate with Naruto-kun in his now feral state? Actually Hokage-sama, I don't know, I just talk to him like any other person, and he seems to understand me. I don't know how, but I guess I in a way, he can feel my emotions and feelings about things. Hinata said as she looked at Naruto, as if she were trying to ascertain as to how exactly he can understand her. Negative emotion sensing. Huh? Everyone in the room asked, as they looked at the aged Hokage to explain what he means. Negative emotion sensing. It was an ability passed on to the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Kitsune who was able to become a true Jinchuriki. The ability was always active in the Jinchuriki once acquired, and with it, the Jinchuriki could feel the negative intentions and darkness in a person's heart. It is how Mito Senju, the first Jinchuriki to the Kyuubi no Kitsune, was able to keep herself safe from people who wanted to use her as a weapon. I believe that Naruto here has also unlocked this ability, but it has evolved so that he not only senses negative, but all types of emotions, intentions, and feelings in the heart. Hiruzen explained to everyone as they caught grasp as to how Naruto using the ability could make it so he understands the people around him. The theory was reinforced when Naruto yipped towards Hiruzen, as if he were saying yes to the theory. Well, that is good, at least we have some way to communicate with Naruto-kun. But now other concerns are coming up as well. Like the academy, Hokage-sama. Yugao said to her aged leader. Hi, Yugao-chan. I do not wish for Hinata-chan here to miss her attendance at the academy this close to graduation. But neither do I wish to run the risk of separating her from Naruto-kun, seeing how fond of her he already is. In his now more instinctual state of mind, he might react in a negative manner without her around. He seems calm and happy with her, don't you all think? earning all nods, a reluctant one from Hiyashi, from all the adults in the room. Seeing as you all agree. Hinata, may I ask of you a very important task? Hi, Hokage-sama. I need you to watch and take care of Naruto-kun there. Even with your ability to sense emotions, and his newfound power, people may target him in the future to use him as they tried to do with Mito Senju when she was the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki. So, Hyuga Hinata, even though you are not officially a shinobi of Konohagakure no Sato, but seeing as you are also the only one that Naruto is calm around, I am tasking you with a high A-ranked mission. Hiruzen continued, switching from his previous grandfatherly tone, to the tone of a Hokage. Your mission is to watch over, take care of, and re-educate one Uzumaki Naruto. Your mission will last until Naruto has reacquired his sense of humanity, and/or reclaimed his former memories. I am trusting you with his well-being, and you shall also have a select high-ranked individuals assisting you as well. Hiyashi-san, Hitomi-san, do you have any concerns or disagreements with Hinata being tasked this duty? Hiruzen asked as he looked towards the Hyuga patriarch and matriarch. None, Hokage-sama, Hitomi said. When she didn't hear an immediate answer from she looked at him and gave him a stern glare. Hiyashi caught the glare and sighed in defeat, giving his answer that he too had no concerns. Very well then, Hinata, you will also be given a substantial amount of allowance by me every week to help you procure any necessary needs that Naruto may need, such as new cloths and food. This way, the Hyuga funds should not be heavily influenced in any way with Naruto's presence here. Arigato, Hokage-sama. I promise that I won't let you or Naruto-kun down. I know. But tomorrow, I will need you and Naruto-kun both to go to class. We need to see how Naruto-kun is within groups, and like I said, we really do not want to know if Naruto acts negatively without you around. Okay Hokage-sama, if you say so. Good. Now then, it has been a really long night. I am tired of all the stuff that's been happening. Catching himself with his words when he noticed Hitomi glaring kunais at him. Now if you excuse me, I need to go home, read my favorite book, get a good smoke, and Kami forbid if I don't get some decent sleep. And note the academy will start late tomorrow at noon, that way you can get Naruto set up with new clothes. Neko here will be watching over you and assisting you as you do so. So with nothing else, I bid you all good night. Hiruzen gave a bow to Hiyashi and Hitomi in thanks for the hospitality, and shot a smile towards Naruto and Hinata, happy that his surrogate grandson was alright. As he left, Yugao, Anko, Kakashi and Shinji were leaving with them behind him, setting off towards their own homes, seeing as Yugao and Anko are roommates. Kakashi was chatting with Shinji that he could bunk over at his place for the night seeing that he was Mia then Kia, so Shinji's previous home was dissolved into Konoha Bank ownership. As the two groups were chatting away, Hiruzen shooting of towards the Hokage mansion for a good night, Yugao and Anko talking about how good it was to have their Ototo back. Kakashi and Shinji were talking about the good old days, killing traitors' body bags, killing bandits' body bags, assassinating crime lords, piss on their bodies, burn them, body bags, burn the body bags. It's good to have your dumb back Shinji, you've gone for too long. Kakashi said, giving Shinji his stereotypical eye smile. Yeah, it's good to be back, sad to see the civilians haven't changed. They're still giving little Naru a hard time, aren't they? Sadly, yes, it really saddens me to see them neglect Sensei's and Kushina's last wish. Yeah, hey Kakashi. Tomorrow, let's watch over Naruto while he and Hinata are at school. Why, I just got this feeling something's going to happen, and our Naruto is going to be in the middle of. Shinji ended with an excited grin. With that stupid grin on your face, I just know it's going to be fun. Count me in. Giving Shinji an even wider eye smile, the two headed off, excited and awaiting to see what storm Naruto was going to brew in the next day. The next day, Hinata's room, 9 a.m. The light of the sun shone all over Konoha, clouds peppering the azure blue, morning sky. The gentle soft breeze whistling through the tree branches, shaking the leaves to play a song in the wind. All in all, it was a beautiful morning. Sadly for Hinata, the sun had to be a bitch that morning and shone perfectly through her window shades, and hitting her perfectly on her the lids of her eyes. Groaning, Hinata stirred from her slumber, awakening to the annoying light coming from her window. Her eyes still closed, she attempted to sit up on her bed, but found she was unable to because of an unexpected weight on her chest. Snapping her eyes open, she peered down to see what was weighing her down. What Hinata saw was Naruto curled in a ball at her side, his left arm hugging her and keeping her close to him. His tails curled around both Hinata and himself to keep both of them warm from the night cold. Naruto's head was rested on her right upper chest area, using it as pillow, his ears resting against the scalp of his head. Hinata giggled lightly when she saw the sleeping face of her feral love, his fangs protruding from the gap between his lips, snoring lightly as he slept. Her giggle, though, was all it took to awaken Naruto. Naruto began stirring from his sleep, yawning the last of it away. He opened his eyes and looked towards Hinata. Yipping, he leaned towards her cheek and began licking her, causing her to blush ferociously. Hinata, although embarrassed from another one of his affectionate displays, did not faint. Mustering all of her resolve, she got Naruto to stop his ministrations so that she could get up and ready for the day. As she was setting out her cloths, she took note of the smell in the room. After a while, she realized that the smell was Naruto himself, and although it might not have showed much in the night, it was now apparent in the day. Naruto was covered mildly in dirt, apart from the area that he had the severe wound on, still surprising that he didn't retain a scar when it fully regenerated. Naruto's hair also looked paler and unkempt, and his fur on his tails and ears were worse, all covered in dirt and grime, and some type of dirty brown thing as well that she finally realized as dry blood. His arms were also covered in dirt and dry blood, and she also took notice that his feet were not normal anymore, earthier, that they were a mix of humanoid from the thigh to kneecap, but vulpine from knee to toe, explaining how he can walk on all fours easily. Seeing she was the one who was to take care of him from here on out, until he regained his lost self or regained a sense of humanity, she beckoned him over to her. Sitting up on the bed, Naruto did a sitting leap towards Hinata, landing on all fours and at ready, motioning for him to follow, she led him towards the house bath. The bath in the main house was a facility of 5 meters wide, 5 meters long, 2.5 meters tall, a large bath taking up 3 meters of the room across, 2 meters wide, and being 2.5 feet deep. When the two reached the bath, Hinata was thankful that no one was occupying the facility. She motioned Naruto to follow her in, and once inside and making sure that the bath had everything she needed, towels, shampoos, etc., she turned on the water to the heat she wanted and began to strip herself of her nightgown. Once out, she used her arms and hand to keep herself covered from Naruto's gaze, her left hand covering the entrance to her womanhood, and her right arm and hand covering her full C-cup. Hinata tried her hardest to keep her thoughts at the task at hand and not faint, remembering that she was not the only one in there that was needed to take a bath. Steeling herself, she began to help him out of what once were his pants, but now were barely holding together. After they were both unclothed, she motioned him to follow her towards a short stool and told him to sit. Confused, Naruto did sit, but that was it, he just sat, as if ordered like a dog, sat on the ground where he was, not on the stool. Tempted to do a face palm on herself, she went over to him, minding all his private bits, she got him to sit on the stool, but only after woman handling him a bit. Hinata went over to the bath and tested it, seeing it was the right temperature to her, she got a small bath bucket and filled it with water. Hinata walked back over to Naruto, and without warning, dumped all of the water on him, causing a lot of the grime, dirt, and dry blood on him to wash away. His hair and fur immediately got soaked and weighted down from the addition of water, causing his hair and ears to flatten against his head, and the hair on the front of his head to drape over and cover his eyes. Naruto slowly turned towards her and gave a look that purely said, "Really? You really just did that?" Giggling at his expression, she got a body scrub and began to wash his back, scrubbing away all the dirt, grime, and all the other things polluting his skin away. It was a while before she was done, and she really was embarrassed when she had to help him scrub that area of his body, but his skin was clean. She did the whole process of cleaning her skin to herself, also dumping a bucket of water on her head, causing Naruto to yip in amusement. She finished up and went back to helping clean Naruto up, only this time with his fur. Grabbing a bottle of shampoo, Hinata squirted some of the content on her hand before lathering her hands a bit and applying it to Naruto's scalp. She began to knead her fingers through his hair, separating any knots that he had, and scratching at his scalp, causing the feral boy to purr in pleasure. She kept kneading at his scalp and through his hair, liking the sounds of his purrs as she did so. When she reached his ears, Naruto's purrs seemed to skyrocket, showing that he liked her scratching them. Finishing with his hair, she turned her attention towards his tails. Realizing that they were going to be more work than his hair was, she went over to one of the cabinets by the door, searched inside, and pulled out a hairbrush. Going back over to Naruto, she led him closer to the bathtub where she grabbed his tails and soaked them in the water. Once soaked, she lathered her hands in shampoo again, as well as pour some on his fur. Hinata then ran her hands through his fur, using the brush as well to get rid of any knots she came across, while also straightening out his orange fur. As Hinata continued to wash his tails, Naruto was enjoying the sensation of her hands through his fur. Purring as she continued her actions, Naruto couldn't help himself as he wanted to thank her. So Naruto turned slightly so that he was facing her, eye to eye, and before she could even question what it was, he leaned his head forward, and slammed his lips into hers. Shocked beyond belief and blushing up the storm of storms, as to what her Naruto just did. She didn't know how to respond, her mind throwing around and running through so many different answers, she didn't know what to do. But then, what felt like a spark running through her body began and mind began to relax into the kiss, and she too, began to return it. Her eyes became half-lidded as she leaned more into the kiss. Time itself, for Hinata seemed to stop, and all of her senses seemed to enhance tenfold. All that mattered to her was that very moment and the taste of his lips on hers. Hinata was savoring everything about the kiss and memorizing it all into her mind. But all too soon, the kiss came to an end. Naruto pulled his lips away from hers, shocking Hinata back into reality. Hinata looked at Naruto questioningly, her eyes asking for why he stopped. All Hinata got back in turn for an answer was Vulpine's smile from Naruto. His smile may look like his old mischievous grin that he used after performing a prank or found himself amused, but in her eyes, Hinata also saw something that she didn't expect to be in it as well. When Hinata stared into his smile and looked into his eyes, she saw adoration, and a lot of it, mind you. Her mind was trying to figure out how Naruto could have so much affection towards her already. It had not even been a full day since she found him and mended his wounds, so how could she already have a special place in his in such short amount of time? Hinata would have continued her pondering, but was interrupted by a large splash. Looking towards where the splash came from, her sight caught Naruto in the bathtub, his tails wagging in and out of the water playfully, while he had a playful look plastered on his face, his tongue sticking out. Shaking her head, imagining that the look he was giving her was that he wanted to play with her in the water, she stood up and went over to the bathtub and got it, immediately getting splashed in the face when Naruto gently flicked one of his tails to create a small wave. She knew this was going to be one low, ing bath. 25 minutes later. Hinata and Naruto were back in Hinata's room and were drying themselves off with a towel. While Hinata was using a towel, Naruto just went with shaking the water off of his body and out of his fur, sadly causing Hinata's efforts at becoming dry more tedious. Sighing, she knew she was right when she thought the bath would be a long one, especially when she and Naruto played around in the bathtub for so long. After drying off her hair and the rest of her body, she put on the undergarments she had prepared for the day that were laid out on her bed, along with the rest of her clothes. Hinata had a little trouble getting her bra on, but she managed. After getting dressed, Hinata went over to Naruto and helped him get dry with one of the spare towels she had for him to use. As she dried of the water from his hair and fur, what she didn't notice was how his hair started to cling to the towel. When she finished drying him off, she took a good look at him to see if she missed a spot. When she saw how he looked at him, she barely could control herself from laughing out loud. When Hinata was drying his fur and hair, what she didn't realize was that she was causing his hair to start and become puffy. Naruto's fur was all over the place. Instead of being brushed back and fluffy, it looked as if each tail and his ears were balls of fur. Laughing at the humorous sight, Hinata decided it would be better if she groomed his fur for him. She went over to her bureau, opened the top drawer, and pulled out a hairbrush. When she turned back to Naruto, she saw that he already got started ahead of her by using his fingers to brush back his fur on one of his tails. She went up to him and sat down next to him, gently grabbing one of his tails. She set it on her lap and began to run the brush through his fur, causing him to purr gently at her action. Grooming his tails took a while, but Hinata was able to brush down his tails and ears. Seeing that he was properly groomed, she was about to get him dressed as well, but remembered that all of his clothes were rags and worn, and she didn't have any clothes that he could use. Near panicking on what to do, Hinata started turning her head frantically back and forth trying to figure out as to what to do. That was, until something caught her eye when her eyes landed on a box with a note on it. Walking towards the box, she picked up the note and read it to see what was written on it. Dear Hinata, we stopped by to escort you to help pick up some new clothes for Naruto-kun. However, we came over when you two were busy getting ready for the day, so Anko and I went and took the liberty of getting him some clothes while you two were busy. We didn't know how much Naruto's changed physically, so we got him some cloths 2 sizes larger than his old ones. Hopefully the ones we picked fit him. Anyways, the academy starts at 12:30 sharp, so be ready by then. Kakashi and Shinji will be the ones escorting you today, but refer to them as Inu and Tora since they will be under Anbu uniform. Sincerely, Yugao and Anko. P.S. Hokage-sama couldn't figure out a way around it, so Naruto-kun will have to stay in his Hanyo form. The cover story is very similar to the original. The story we will be using is that Danzo captured Naruto for his immense chakra coils and tried to turn him into a weapon using Biju chakra, Naruto being the only survivor. After reading the note, Hinata let out a sigh before opening the box and pulled out its contents. Just like the note had said, inside was a full set of clothes and undergarments for him to wear, even augmented so that his tails won't be restrained when wearing them. Calling Naruto over, Hinata started in getting the Hanyo dressed in his new attire. Thankfully for Hinata, Naruto didn't struggle that much at all when she was getting him dressed. The only issue they had to cross was getting all of his tails in the hole they were supposed to go in so that he can wear his pants. When he was finally dressed, Hinata took a good look at Naruto and could say that Yugao and Anko did a really good job. Naruto's new attire was made up of a black medium long sleeve shirt that only reached a little below his elbows. The shirt was designed with a white whirlpool symbol in the center of his chest, a white trim adding detail to the shirt. On his legs, Naruto was wearing black cargo shorts that went down to cover his kneecaps, a hip pouch sewn into the right hip area, and a white trimming outlining the shorts the same way it did for the shirt, showing that the two were a set. The extra pockets were colored orange. The final piece of the new outfit was the short-sleeved hoodie that Naruto was wearing. The hoodie consisted of both white, black, and orange. Okay, let's face it. Naruto makes orange work, hands down about that. Altogether, and with his new feral features, Hinata thought the boy looked quite handsome. The outfit also came with some ninja tabi, but they weren't able to fit on Naruto because of the new structure his lower legs took on, but it was all right seeing that even without the tabi, he could still probably walk and run on any types of surfaces. Walking towards the door, Hinata called Naruto over to her side. Once walking on all fours, Hinata led Naruto downstairs and towards the kitchen for breakfast. Once down, they noticed that, although the kitchen was empty, Hitomi took it upon herself to make them brunch. After eating, Hinata and Naruto set out to get ready for Naruto's return to the academy. Hinata went to the compound's dojo and found her father and little sister in a training session. Telling them both that she was heading off to the academy, her sister and father nodded, giving their go-ahead and didn't need her to do anything for the day, and went back to training, although, Naruto made it hard for them to return to training when he seemed to wave goodbye with one of his tails. They were heading out to the main compound gate when she saw her mother standing there with two ANBUs wearing a tiger and dog mask. Hitomi went up to her daughter and told her to have a good day, and to take care of herself. She turned her attention to Naruto and asked him to look after Hinata. Tilting his head in slight confusion, he then snapped it back to attention and yipped happily at the older woman, in a way telling her that he understood and will protect Hinata. After Hitomi said her goodbye for the day, the two teens turned their attention to the ANBUs in front of them. Yo, we will be your escorts for today, so don't worry. Although, I think we may be a little late for the day. Kakashi said behind his Anbu mask, temporarily retaking his old position so that he could watch over Naruto. Inu. The academy was going to start late today anyways, so we aren't really going to be late, in fact, we may be early. Shinji said to Kakashi before turning towards Naruto and Hinata and telling them to hold on. Kakashi and Shinji walked up to them and clasped their hands on their shoulders and shunshined themselves to the academy grounds. Once there, Hinata asked if the both of them were going to be watching over them for the whole day, wanting to make sure that someone will help them out if they try to hurt Naruto, not like he needed help. Kami, they were probably only there to make sure he didn't kill anyone. The two of them told Hinata that they were to watch over them to make sure that no one tried anything against Naruto. And with that, Naruto and Hinata went off to class, Naruto following closely behind Hinata on all fours, and Kakashi and Shinji shadowing them both. When they reached their classroom, Hinata used her Byakugan to peer inside to make sure that no one was inside. Sadly for her, Iruka-sensei was inside, along with a couple students, them being Sasuke, Sakura and Ino bickering about who was going to sit next to Sasuke, even though there were two open seats next to him. Choji, Shikamaru, and Shino were seated and waiting for Iruka to start the class, as well as a few civilian students. Looking over to Naruto, who just smiled at her when she looked at him, she drew in strength from his presence, and opened the door. When the door to the classroom opened, Iruka turned to see Hinata walk into the classroom with a little more confidence in her step, but still retained that shyness as well, but it was the second person that walked in behind her that shocked Iruka. When Naruto went missing, he helped out in searching for the boy, but couldn't contribute much because of his status as an academy teacher. When Naruto went missing, he ran away because the boy thought he couldn't become a good shinobi, slightly blaming himself for not giving the kid good instruction in the academy. Iruka liked the kid, but he didn't want to get too involved with him because of him being the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi. But now, as he sees Naruto in his new Hanyo form, he felt as if he was about to faint in pure terror. Similar reactions were being played out through the rest of the classroom as students began talking in hushed whispers and talks. Hyuga Hinata, is that? Hi, sensei. This is Naruto-kun. However, he didn't run away as many assumed he did all those months ago. Danzo Shimura, an elder on the Konoha Council kidnapped him and tried to turn him into a weapon for his own use, along with 9 others by using Biju Chakra. He chose Naruto-kun because of his high Jonin level chakra reserves at the time, and I implanted the chakra of the Kyuubi no Kitsune into his chakra core. By doing so, Danzo turned him into a Hanyo, human and part Biju, and Naruto-kun is the only one out of the 9 that survived the implantation. Hinata said, doing her best to make the cover story that Hiruzen gave them for her teacher. However, since Iruka already knew about Naruto being the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki, he started to suspect that what she gave off was the cover to the real story, since she said, implanted the chakra of the Kyuubi no Kitsune, but why would you want to implant something, when it's already in the object person you want it in? He minded though that cover stories exist for a reason, and decided to pay the Hokage a visit after class to know the real reason. The reaction in the room to the cover was mixed. Shikamaru, Choji, and Shino showed that they felt sorry for the Hanyo. Ino was shocked by the news and her hand was covering her mouth. Sasuke looked at Naruto wide-eyed, but it was unclear as to what emotion he was displaying, and Sakura, now that was a disgusting one, she was faking shock, but underneath, she was showing disgust and disdain towards the Hanyo. Hinata was able to see through the Haruno's mask and looked at the girl with disgust. Iruka was about to tell Hinata to go to her seat, but then something that she said crossed his mind. Hinata, you said that Naruto had high Jonin level chakra reserves. What did you mean? Anyo, it's exactly as I said it, Iruka-sensei. When Naruto-kun first entered the academy, he already had high Genin chakra reserves, and before he disappeared, he had high Jonin R reserves. It was the R reason that Naruto-kun had such terrible C chakra control. He can't do an E-rank jutsu W without overloading it with C chakra. Hinata stuttered out, poking her fingers together in embarrassment at all the attention she was getting. Everyone was stunned to hear that the only reason that Naruto was the dead last of the class was because of problem that almost all ninjas consider a blessing. Oh, the irony. Of course, this new enlightenment caused an array of mixed emotions and reactions with everyone. Iruka, however, started putting 2 and 2 together, and finally came to realization. It wasn't that he couldn't do the Bunshin no Jutsu because he was a bad student. It was because it was physically impossible for him, Kami, and I practically humiliated him in front of everyone by displaying him as a horrible student. Iruka now regretted his previous actions towards the boy, and made a silent promise to himself that he would try and be better. Although he still felt fear towards his new Hanyo status, when Iruka crossed eyes with Naruto, he saw the feral ferocity behind them, but also saw some of the old Naruto as well, the prankster, kind-hearted, loudmouth, and determined boy that he used to. Showing a sign that he could return to his old self. Turning back to Hinata, he told her and Naruto to go and take their seat in the back of the class. Naruto and Hinata were getting strange looks from everyone, but Naruto was taking the brunt of it as they all watched him and how his Hanyo features twitched when he heard something or took another step up to his and Hinata's desk. When they got to the desk, Hinata sat down next to the window, and Naruto sat right next, but he sat like a canine would on the seat, and under the table he wrapped a couple of his tails, causing her to blush, but smile at him appreciatively for using his tails to keep her warm. Hinata then dug into her hip pouch and pulled out a notebook, writing brush, and some ink. Naruto took a look at the objects in confusion, eyeing them as if they were from a whole entire different world. After not being able to figure out what they do, he decided that he would spend his time better by grooming his tails with his claws. Time passed and soon enough, The rest of the students flooded into the room and Aruka started the class and everyone turned their attention to the board as Aruka went over the lesson of the day. Everyone except for Shikamaru who fell back asleep after the Naruto affair, Choji who was eating some chips, Sasuke who was achieving a new level of brooding, and Naruto who was just playing with his tails and watching Hinata. Apparently Mizuki was sick that week and he couldn't attend the class, so it was only Aruka today. Midway through the first lesson, the door opened abruptly and Kiba stood in the doorway, a white puppy with brown floppy ears on his head. Kiba's abrupt entrance into the classroom caused Aruka to halt his lesson as he turned towards his late student. Kiba, you're late. Hee hee. Sorry sensei. Kinda lost track of time and. Enough. Just go take your seat Kiba, and pay attention. Hi sensei. Kiba then started walking up the steps trying to find a place to sit. His eyes landed on Hinata and he eyed her appearance lustfully, not even looking to see if anyone was seated next to her. He started walking towards her desk and when he reached, he mimicked a smile to look as gentlemanly as possible. Kami, what a scumbag. Hey Hinata-chan, how are you? You weren't too scared about the events last night without your Kiba to protect you, were you? Kiba said, his voice slipping slightly making him sound lecherous. Hinata looked at him timidly. A sense of danger was running through her. Naruto sensed Hinata's distress and acted by growling at Kiba, baring his fangs, and unconsciously releasing a large amount of killing intent that not only stunned Kiba, but also caused everyone to turn towards their direction. What everyone also didn't notice was that in the shadows, Kakashi had to stop Shinji from pulling an Anko, and castrating the boy, with a spoon. What the? Naruto. What the happened to him? Kiba asked, shocked by Naruto's new appearance. At the same time, Akamaru was shivering in utter fear and was close to wetting himself, calling Naruto, true alpha, but was only understood by Kiba. Kiba was shocked that Akamaru called Naruto an alpha, let alone a true alpha, but decided to ignore the puppy's words warning. I don't know what the happened to you Naruto, but this is none of your business, so why don't you be a good dead last and sit somewhere else while I talk to my Hinata-chan? Kiba said, sounded all high and mighty. This time, in the shadows, Shinji had to stop Kakashi from using all 1000 jutsus in his arsenal to destroy the mud all high heaven. Grow, grunt, growl. What did you just call me? Kiba asked in rage while Akamaru looked in shock towards Naruto. Everyone went wide-eyed at the implication of the events transpiring, especially Shinji and Kakashi, as something was revealed to them all, and Inuzuka can understand Naruto's words. Grow, snort. How dare you? You will walk away from Hinata-chan right now. Or else. Kiba's words immediately got a reaction from Naruto as the tails that he had wrapped around Hinata undid themselves and all 9 of his tails bristled in fury, his whisker marks became more bolded, and his slit for a pupil narrowed dangerously. Growl. Snarl. Naruto snarled at the boy, his canines becoming longer in his anger. His words for whatever they were caused Kiba's eyes to go wide-eye and his mouth opened in shock. Did you just call her your mate? Kiba stuttered out with shock in his voice. His eyes went to Hinata and his nose immediately caught his scent on the girl, but what really caught his attention was the symbol of a fox paw glowing through her clothes. Everyone turned to where he was looking and saw the same symbol glowing. Kiba then snarled in anger at the feral boy. You son of a bitch. She was supposed to be mine. My bitch to mate with. Kiba roared in fury as he threw a fist at Naruto. Kiba's words were the final kicker for Naruto though as he snapped and roared with rage hotter than the flames of hell themselves. He ducked and went to the right side of the feral boy, bypassing all of his defenses so fast he even left an afterimage, causing all to go wide-eyed at the speed he displayed. Not even a second later, one Naruto's tails wrapped around the wrist of the fist Kiba threw the boy through the classroom and into chalkboard, literally. Kiba's body hanged in front of the classroom, his backside visible to everyone, and his head implanted through the chalkboard, spider web cracks running through the whole board from one end to the other. Everyone stared in shock at how easily Naruto defeated Kiba with only 2 moves, and the damage that his throw did cause all to fear being on the receiving. Kakashi and Shinji's eyes were almost popping out of the sockets and mask holes at the power and speed the boy displayed. Akamaru, who fell off when his master was thrown, was staring in utter fear and wet the floor, unable to control his body any longer in fear. Hinata was happy and relieved that Naruto wasn't hurt, and somewhat turned on by the power he displayed. Naruto was standing where he was, his tail still thrashing angrily and his whole presence glaring death at the dog boy. The whole classroom stood in silence as seconds passed by, but like any good storm, there is always an aftermath, and the aftermath for this storm came in the form of a civilian whose whole body was filled in excitement and adrenaline. He stood up from his seat, and pointed his finger at Naruto, his eyes filled with the fire of determination. Get him. And just like that, the chaos began. Play Run Around by Jason Radford. With those words, every single male student who was stupid enough, meaning that Shikamaru, Shino, and Choji. These guys actually started taking students and Iruka into a safe zone, including Hinata, who was scared for her Naruto-kun, and where Shikamaru started asking for bets while wearing a dealer's visor, stood and charged towards Naruto. Naruto looked at them in excitement, understanding what they wanted, and he'll give it to them. Making sure that Hinata wouldn't get hurt, he grinned mischievously and charged forward. Naruto grabbed the arm of one of the students that charged at him and flung him back, knocking 2 others who were in the air that lunged at him, out of the air and onto the ground unconscious. Not losing any momentum, Naruto flipped onto the floor and stood on his hands, twirling himself around. He used his legs and tails and helicopter kicked 4 more students out by the force. The sound of a good fight started to draw even more into the classroom as male students from all the other classrooms started to flood into the classroom. Even Sasuke felt invigorated and joined into the fray of battle. Student after student, Naruto used his fist to knock their teeth out, his tails to send them flying, or his legs to kick them to submission. After 20 students laid in defeat, not one even able to touch a single strand of fur on him, he came face to face with Sasuke, a fire burning in both of their eyes. Sadly for Sasuke, when he charged at Naruto, he came face to foot with a Chuck Norris roundhouse kick, sending him towards the chalkboard. When Sasuke collided with the chalkboard, back first, the force he flew towards it caused Kiba's head to become free of the wall, and he fell on his back. Sasuke bounced off the wall and fell face first towards the cruel floor, but sadly, he was denied the feel of the floor as his lips crashed into Kiba's in a final humiliation until he fell unconscious. Seeing their precious Sasuke-kun get hurt, Ino and Sakura stood up from the safe zone and yelled in unison. Naruto Baka, look what you did to Sasuke-kun. Let's get him, girls. And with their screech of war flooded through the whole academy and into the Hokage Tower, stopping Hiruzen from the dreaded paperwork. Fangirls left the safe zone and flooded into the room, surrounding Naruto. Naruto looked around him and grinned in glee and excitement for the fighting to start again. But then, out of nowhere, the windows shattered, the 2 people flying in screaming at the top of their lungs their battle cry. Dabaru Dane Amiku Entori, Maida Guy and Lee flew into the room through the room, landing in their famous, good guy pose. We felt in the flames of youth a very youthful battle to commence. We too, shall fight. Guy said, flashing his teeth and almost blinding everyone in the room. Yes, sensei. It shall be most youthful indeed. And should I lose, I shall run around Konoha on my bare hands while balancing an egg on each foot. Lee said, getting into the Goken stance, Guy following him as well, screaming about how proud and youthful Lee. When Naruto eyed his challengers, he smiled a toothy grin. Now it was a party. With a mighty and happy roar, everyone lunged, charged, and punched towards the boy in with their own battle cries, and thus, began party time. Stop song. 1 hour, and 151 unconscious bodies later. Naruto stood there outside in one of the academy training grounds. On top of a 10-meter hill of piled up, unconscious bodies of students who wanted an epic fight. Fangirls who wanted to avenge their Sasuke-kun, some teachers who tried to stop the fight, Naruto haters, and at the very top, Maida Guy and Rock Lee's prone forms, their weights long forgotten in the fighting, them being the only ones that were able to touch Naruto, but sadly for them, they had to grab one of his tails, causing him to start beating them till both of their faces were swollen, blue and purple, and had a few missing teeth. Naruto stood on top of the hill, putting the phrase, King of the Hill, into proper use as he groomed his tail, as if the whole hill of unconscious bodies was no big deal. Down below at the foot of the hill stood Iruka, mouth hanging in shock, Shikamaru and Shino counting the hundreds of ryos they won in the betting, Hiruzen Sarutobi, who came out to see what all the racket was about until he saw the fighting going down. He was smoking his pipe while admiring the mighty hill that Naruto made, and was really impressed and scared when he saw Guy and Lee get beaten to high heaven when they grabbed Naruto's tail. He only saw something that brutal when Kushina was in the academy and she beat up the bitch that called her clan, a clan of useless whores. Who was that girl again? He could have sworn that she was still around somewhere. Also standing at the foot of the great hill was Hinata, who was staring up at her Naruto with a loving and happy gaze that he was alright. Others that were walking by the academy stopped and looked at the hill in shock. They were even more shocked when they saw Naruto's new appearance. Onlookers started to walk in and view the hill's glory, while medics from the hospital finally came to take the losers to the hospital. While this was happening, one of the last victims of Naruto's academy beatdown woke up into a groggy daze for a short while, only able to say a few words. That fight was awesome. And then he was out like a light. Naruto yipped in agreement to the boy and continued to groom his tail. Standing at the hill, not caring to stay in the shadows any longer, Shinji and Kakashi viewed the hill. Then Shinji turned his gaze towards Kakashi, a large and playful grin plaster on his face. I told you he was going to do something awesome today, and that was awesome. And that's that. Tell me how it was, rate and review, and flamers can go submit to the torture of Guy and Lee's Sunset Genjutsu, Speedo Edition. I would also like to tell you that I have posted a poll on my bio asking how you guys want the teams to be set up. If you have any ideas on what the two teams should be, PM me, I might remake the poll with your suggestion. Anyways, until the next chapter. Ya nay. Next chapter. Explanations, a new prophecy, and, is that a bunny? Omake. Kurama's entrance into heaven. Kurama was walking up the final steps on the stairway to heaven, still garbed in his white kimono. He looked forward and saw a golden gate with a podium standing on the side. Kurama walked towards the gate and saw a woman standing behind the podium, a woman whose beauty could not even match any words, for they would be not worthy enough to describe he, but Kurama could say one thing that would do some justice, that she was a goddess. He continued to walk forwards until his presence caught the woman's attention, causing her to look towards him. Hello Kurama-kun, it's been many years since we last met. How are you? The woman asked, giving the deceased Biju King a beautiful smile, causing him to smile as well at the warmth behind the smile, reminding him of one of equal warmth. Well, besides the fact I'm dead, had to turn my son into a hanyo, and had to walk 1,000,001 steps Kurama. The woman corrected, her smile turning teasingly. Thanks, Kami. Besides all that, I guess I'm good, although I am wondering what that feeling I had before was all about. Perhaps that feeling came when Naruto marked Hinata Hyuga as his mate. The now recognized Kami said with a knowing smile, her words causing Kurama's face to turn into a shit-eating grin. That's my boy. Not even 24 hours of going fox and already has a mate. Kurama howled in laughter, doing a small jig in his happiness, causing the goddess in front of him to laugh at his antics. Well, Kurama, I'm glad to see you approve of Naruto-kun's actions, and now it's time to read the list of your good deeds. I have to say, even though there were many evil deeds on your list, the good deeds you had were beautiful and so kind-hearted. Kurama blushed and scratched the back of his head sheepishly, his tails wagging softly. Now then, let's see what you got. Saving a village from a volcano, saving a baby from being eaten by Shukaku, stopping the Leviathan invasion by yourself, making sure the rest of your brethren escaped alive and almost lost your eye and 2 of your tails, my favorite, gave Naruto-kun a father, and exterminated all of the evil demonic psycho killer bunnies.